In 1959, 12 nations signed a treaty that would lock away an entire continent for nearly a century. Not from war, not from colonization, from mineral exploration. The Antarctic Treaty forbids any nation from conducting mineral surveys until the year 2048, 89 years of silence. But here's what they don't tell you. The nations that signed this treaty, they didn't need to survey Antarctica. They already knew what was there. And what they found was so significant, so world-changing, that they decided the only solution was to make sure nobody else could look. Not for another century. If you're interested in the hidden history they don't want you to discover, hit subscribe. I cover forbidden topics like this every week. Now let's talk about what's really buried under the ice. Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Geological evidence shows that 15 million years ago, Antarctica was a temperate landmass covered in forests. Before that, going back 200 million years, it was part of Gondwana, the ancient supercontinent that included South America, Africa, India and Australia. This wasn't some barren wasteland. This was prime real estate, lush vegetation, flowing rivers, and based on what we know about every other landmass that shared those conditions, massive mineral deposits. But the official story says we don't know what's under the ice, that the technology to survey beneath miles of glacial sheet is too expensive, too difficult, too dangerous. Except that's not true. Ground-penetrating radar has existed since the 1970s. Satellite imagery can detect mineral signatures through ice. We have technology that can map the ocean floor 7 miles deep, but we're supposed to believe we can't see what's under Antarctica. The truth is simpler. They don't want us to look because they already looked, and they found something that changed everything. Let's go back to 1947. Operation High Jump. The United States launched the largest Antarctic expedition in history. 13 ships, 4,700 personnel, 6 helicopters, 6 flying boats, 2 seaplane tenders. Under the command of Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, a man who had already made his name exploring both poles. The official mission was to establish research bases and test military equipment in cold weather conditions. That's the story they told the public. But Operation High Jump wasn't scheduled to last 6 months. It was supposed to be an 8-month expedition. Yet it was terminated abruptly after only 8 weeks. Admiral Byrd returned to the United States and reportedly told the press that America needed to prepare for the possibility of an invasion by aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Those statements were later walked back, dismissed as misquotes. But the transcripts exist, and Byrd's journal entries, declassified decades later, tell a very different story about what his team encountered in the frozen south. The Chilean and Argentinian press reported that Byrd's expedition faced resistance, not from weather, not from equipment failure, but from something else entirely, something that caused significant casualties and forced an early retreat. When Byrd returned, he was debriefed by military intelligence for several hours. The details of that debriefing remain classified to this day. But within 12 years of Operation High Jump's mysterious termination, 12 nations gathered in Washington, D.C. to sign the Antarctic Treaty. The same nations that had been conducting their own secretive expeditions to the continent throughout the 1950s. Think about the timing. The world in 1959 was locked in the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union couldn't agree on anything. They were building nuclear arsenals, racing to space, fighting proxy wars across the globe, but somehow they both agreed to lock down Antarctica, to demilitarize it, to prevent any mineral exploration until 2048. The Soviet Union, a nation desperate for natural resources to fuel its industrial complex, agreed to leave an entire continent untouched for nearly a century. Does that sound like Cold War politics to you? The treaty itself is unusual in its specificity. Article 1 prohibits any military activity. Article 5 bans nuclear testing. But it's Article 7 that reveals the real agenda. Article 7 grants any signatory nation the right to inspect any other nation's facilities in Antarctica at any time without notice. Total transparency. Except for one thing. Mineral surveys, those are banned outright under the 1991 Protocol on Environmental Protection, which extended the original treaty and pushed mineral exploration prohibition to 2048. Why 2048? The official answer is environmental protection, preserving the pristine Antarctic ecosystem. But if that were true, why not ban it permanently? Why set a specific end date almost 50 years in the future? because whoever drafted this protocol knew that by 2048, something would change. Either the geopolitical landscape would be so different that the secret no longer mattered, or the resources under the ice would become so critical that extraction would be unavoidable. Either way, they picked a date far enough in the future that everyone who knew the truth would be dead. Now let's talk about what they found. The geological surveys conducted before 1991, the ones that were allowed, revealed something extraordinary. Antarctica sits on one of the richest mineral belts on Earth. Coal deposits exceeding 500 billion tons. Iron ore in quantities that dwarf Australia's reserves. Copper, gold, platinum, uranium and rare earth elements in concentrations found nowhere else on the planet. But the most significant discovery wasn't a mineral. It was evidence of advanced geometric structures beneath the ice. In 2001, a joint Russian-American team using ice-penetrating radar detected a massive anomaly beneath the ice near Lake Vostok. The anomaly measured approximately 250 meters in length and had a perfectly geometric shape. Not natural, not random, geometric. The data was classified immediately. The research team was withdrawn. And Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake the size of Lake Ontario that had been isolated from the surface for 15 million years, became a restricted zone. The official reason was contamination concerns. They didn't want to introduce surface bacteria into a pristine ecosystem. But bacteria doesn't explain why satellite imagery of the area is still redacted on every publicly available mapping service. Then there's the Piri Reis map. In 1929, a group of historians found an ancient map in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. The map, created in 1513 by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, shows the coastline of Antarctica with remarkable accuracy. But here's the problem. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and the coastline shown on the Piri Reis map isn't the ice-covered coast we see today. It's the actual landmass beneath the ice, a coastline that hasn't been visible for at least 6,000 years. Piri Reis noted on his map that he compiled it from older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, which means that someone thousands of years ago had the capability to map Antarctica before it was frozen. Someone had been there, had surveyed it, had documented its mountains, rivers and coastal features in extraordinary detail. And whoever they were, they had technology that shouldn't have existed. The modern scientific explanation is that the Piri Reis map is a coincidence, a lucky guess, or that it depicts the coast of South America and later cartographers mistakenly labelled it as Antarctica. Except the coordinates match, the mountain ranges match, and the level of detail matches modern surveys conducted with ground-penetrating radar. So either Piri Reis had access to technology we didn't rediscover until the 1970s, or he copied maps created by a civilization we've been told never existed. This brings us to the Tartaria connection. For those unfamiliar, Tartaria refers to a proposed advanced civilization that allegedly existed across much of Asia, Europe, and possibly other continents before being erased from mainstream history. The evidence for Tartaria is circumstantial but compelling. Massive architectural structures built with techniques we can't replicate. Worldwide mud flood events documented in the 1800s, a sudden reset of recorded history around the same time, and now potentially a connection to Antarctica. What if Tartaria wasn't just a continental empire? What if it was global? What if the Piri Reis map wasn't copied from ancient Greeks or Phoenicians, but from Tartarian cartographers who had mapped the entire world, including Antarctica, before the cataclysm that buried their civilization? And what if the 1947 expeditions to Antarctica weren't looking for military sites or mineral deposits? What if they were looking for evidence of Tartaria? Physical proof that an advanced pre-modern civilization existed and was deliberately erased from our history books? Admiral Byrd's alleged journal entries describe discovering a massive opening in the ice that led to a temperate valley with lakes, vegetation, and structures. Structures that didn't look natural. Structures that looked built. When his team approached, they were allegedly intercepted by aircraft that defied physics. Disc-shaped craft that moved without sound, and at speeds that made modern jets look primitive. The beings that communicated with Byrd's team, according to these accounts, warned him that humanity was not ready for the technology buried beneath the ice, that we would destroy ourselves if we gained access to it. Whether you believe Byrd's alleged journals or not, the fact remains that something happened during Operation High Jump that changed the trajectory of Antarctic exploration. From 1947 onward, every major nation with the resources to mount expeditions focused on Antarctica, and 12 years later, they all agreed to lock it down, not to exploit it, not to colonize it, to bury it, to make sure that whatever is under that ice stays under that ice until 2048. But why 2048 specifically? One theory is that it corresponds to solar cycles. The sun operates on an 11-year cycle of solar, maximum and minimum, but there's a longer cycle, a grand solar minimum that occurs approximately every 200 years and lasts for several decades. We're currently entering one, and by 2048 we'll be deep into a period of reduced solar activity that could trigger rapid climate shifts. If Antarctica begins to melt naturally, the structures beneath the ice will be exposed whether the treaty allows it or not. So the date isn't arbitrary. It's a countdown to when the truth can no longer be hidden. Another theory focuses on the geopolitical landscape. By 2048, the current world powers, the United States, Russia, China, will have undergone significant transitions, new leadership, new priorities, and the individuals who signed the original treaty, who knew what was really under the ice, will be long dead, their secrets buried with them, which means 2048 represents a reset, a point where the next generation of leaders can claim ignorance and begin resource extraction without admitting that their predecessors knew all along. Here's what we know for certain. Antarctica contains mineral wealth that exceeds every other continent combined. The coastline beneath the ice was accurately mapped thousands of years before modern civilization claims to have discovered it. Multiple nations that couldn't agree on anything else agreed to ban mineral surveys for nearly a century. And the man who led the largest Antarctic expedition in history returned with stories of advanced aircraft and hidden valleys that were immediately suppressed. So what's really under the ice? Is it just minerals, or is it proof that our entire understanding of human history is a manufactured lie, that advanced civilizations rose and fell long before Sumer and Egypt, that Tartaria wasn't a myth but a global empire with technology we've only recently begun to rediscover, and that the Antarctic Treaty isn't about protecting penguins, it's about protecting the narrative, the story they need us to believe so we don't start arguing why our ancestors could build structures we can't replicate, map continents we claim they never visited, and develop technologies that shouldn't have existed. 24 years from now the treaty expires, the ban on mineral surveys lifts, and unless they extend it again, which they very well might, the world will finally have legal permission to dig, to survey, to uncover what's been buried for millennia. The question is, will they tell us what they find, or will 2048 come and go with another round of excuses, another extension, another century of silence, while they slowly excavate the truth and keep it locked away in classified vaults? Because if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that the people in power don't give up secrets willingly. They don't declassify the documents that matter. They don't release the maps that rewrite history. They control the narrative. And when 12 nations locked in a Cold War agree to leave the most resource-rich continent on Earth untouched for a century, you can be damn sure they're not doing it for the environment. They're doing it because what's under that ice is too dangerous, too valuable, or too truth-shattering to let the public see. So keep watching, keep questioning, because 2048 is coming. And when it does, we'll find out if they finally tell the truth, or if they just move the goalposts again. If you want to stay ahead of the hidden history they're trying to bury, subscribe now. Next week I'm breaking down the mud flood event of the 1800s and why entire cities were buried almost overnight. The video is on screen. Click it. Click.